Welcome to I'm Telling HR, the go-to podcast for ambitious HR professionals who are looking to shake up the status quo, make a real impact, and fast-track their careers. Today, we're joined by Jami Schultz, VP of Corporate Human Resources at Canon USA, where she's responsible for all employee relations as well as the company's learning and development and talent management teams within HR. Jami and her team are responsible for organizational development, succession planning, and creating and analyzing employee engagement initiatives. In this episode, we'll be talking about her experience in employee engagement and how you can take employee feedback and implement it to raise engagement and satisfaction at your company.
Canon's dedicated approach to employee engagement really goes back to about 2016. That was when we launched for the first time our first employee engagement survey. Since it was brand new for us at the time, we did a survey every year. So much had changed between the last survey that we did in 2019 and the one that we did in 2020. So it was just kind of fascinating to have that much time pass and just see how the responses changed, the response to different programs that we had put into place in that couple year period. First couple of years, we used the exact same questions. We really wanted to have a baseline. After the couple of year break that we had there when we launched our survey in 2022, we actually did change things up a little bit. And for the first time in that survey, we added a free and open text box question. So our previous surveys were really just ratings on a scale. Do you strongly agree? Do you agree? Are you neutral? Disagree? And it was just a rating scale. But our most recent survey, for the first time, we actually had, I believe, 2 different free text box questions. So that actually gave employees the opportunity to type a little narrative to us. So that was a big difference, and we'll definitely make sure to keep the text box included in future surveys. I think this really helps with the response rate that we always get from our surveys. We actually hire a third-party company to run the engagement survey for us. Obviously, we have significant input into the questions that we want asked, but it's actually this third-party company that does all of the analysis of the responses. I am not the one, and frankly, nobody from Canon is actually reading through the individual responses or seeing the ratings. It's all compiled by our third party. We give employees a significant amount of time to complete it. It's not like we launch it and say, we need your responses in a week. There is a feature where they can save their progress and come back to it if they can't complete the whole thing in one shot. We found especially the first year or 2 of the survey, when it was so new, when the company had never done anything like this before, it really was communicating and driving home that point of this is anonymous, so you can feel free to share honest feedback. What about the manager that may only have one direct report? Well, the way our feedback and our results is compiled, individual managers will only get what we call a rolled up report. So if I'm an individual manager and I only have one person or 2 people, I'm actually not going to get any kind of rolled up report. It'll have to go to my next level manager. So you need at least 6, I believe is the number, direct reports to have a rolled up report just for your group. And these were the things that we communicated to employees that I think helped them with that comfort level of, I can be honest here with my responses. We actually categorize them into 3 different sets of questions. First set of questions is related to, we call it the I index. It's the individual index. So it's a bunch of questions about how you as the individual relate to your work, your job, and your experience. So it'll be questions like, I feel a connection to the company message, or I understand how my work priorities relate relate to the overall company message. I feel I am supported and have the resources I need. And again, this is all, you're then supposed to answer on a sliding scale of, strongly agree to strongly disagree. The second group of questions is on the M or manager index. So those are questions about how you feel and relate to your direct manager. So things like, my manager provides me constructive feedback on my performance, agree, disagree. My manager, supports my, career priorities. My manager gives me the tools that I need to succeed in my job. Things like that. And then the third index is about the executive level. So those are questions about how you feel about the company's executive leadership. And so those questions are like, I believe that, the executives communicate openly and honestly with employees. Agree, disagree. I believe that company executives share the company mission appropriately, things like that. So we found that helpful in terms of, like divvying it up in terms of questions about how you feel as an individual, how you feel about your manager, and then how you feel about your executive leadership. Going back to the very first time we were launching a survey, it was extremely important to have buy-in in advance all the way to the top, from our CEO to all of our C-suite and other members of executive leadership. We had to make sure that our executive leadership understood and bought into the fact that the absolute worst thing for a company to do is roll out a survey where you're asking employees for feedback, but then do nothing in response to it, because then employees are going to feel like, we submitted all this feedback, we all completed the survey, but nothing has changed. We can't point to anything concrete that the company did that we could say, oh, they did that in response to the survey. So we had buy-in, again, all the way from the top, from the very beginning, that the executives were going to let us present the feedback once it came in and was compiled, and then work with HR and the leadership team to strategize about things that we could do, whether it was new programs or, new approaches to help make improvement. I love to say one of the best measures, of our success, I think, I mentioned the gap in time that we had from when we did our 2019 survey to when we did our 2022 survey, the first one post-COVID. And we were so proud of the fact that our levels of engagement and satisfaction rose significantly on every index. The seat at the table is so important. That's something that, one of our previous heads of HR used to always preach to us as a team was, we have to make sure we have a seat at the table, that we're in front of things rather than being called in, once a problem has already come up. So for me, how do you get that seat at the table? Again, it's about building a relationship with your top leaders. I was fortunate enough that, when I was, lower in HR from a leadership capacity, the head of HR always made sure to bring me along to important meetings with the CEO, with the executive leadership team, so that they know who I was and could get a sense of how I approach things and my judgment and things like that. So when I then stepped into the role of heading up HR, I already had that foundational, trust and connection with our executive leaders. So to any other HR leader, I would say, if you don't already feel like you have a strong connection and relationship with your top leadership, start to get one, and whether that's, asking for, a standing monthly meeting with, whether it's the CEO or other members of executive leadership, find a way to get yourself in the door of your top executives, because once they feel like they know who you are and they trust your guidance and where you're coming from, that gets you the seat at the table. And that's when you have then the ability to say, you know what, I've been noticing perhaps, our employees are feeling a little demotivated. I have some thoughts as to a program we might be able to put into place. And when you've built that relationship and have established some credibility, your leaders are more likely to, listen to your ideas and suggestions. The most effective way, to build yourself is don't just come to me and say, here's a problem. I want to say, okay, thank you for identifying the problem. What do you think we should do about it? So I always advocate for, when you see a problem, think of at least a suggestion for how to approach the problem and go in with that suggestion. Maybe that'll end up being the way you go, or maybe someone else will have a different idea. But best thing to do is always identify the problem and propose a solution or an alternative. I think the most important thing, again, is to listen to your employees. Ask them how they're feeling, even if it's not through a formal survey. Just have conversations. Hey, is there anything that you think we could do to make things better? Because again, even if your company is performing well, having good sales results or whatever, that doesn't always mean that your employees are fully engaged and satisfied. And sometimes it could be something as small as offering free coffee. That's something that we did too in response to our engagement survey. And it's amazing how much something like free coffee can do for employee morale. So sometimes enhancing engagement doesn't even have to be a huge expense or, a radical change to company policy. It can be something really small too. But if it's in, direct response to a feeling or an issue that your employees are having, it can go such a long way.